Good morning. I hope you can hear me well. Okay, so maybe we can start with the slides. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me today. Actually, it was kind of a surprise because I was wondering as an anthropologist what could I do in such an important forum. But it's also an honor actually. So maybe my job here will be to try to get a different perspective, a slightly different perspective, on the question of indigenous cultures, languages and scripts in the era of Industry 4.0. So, next slide please. Actually, we're going to discuss here about sources. I mean by sources, heritage, culture, performing arts, language, education, religion, how we can use them, how they are active and present in our society, including intercultural communication every day, and how we can also mobilize them for the future, always reminding that we have to deal with sustainability issues, including cultural and environmental stewardship. Next slide, please. So first, I would like to, let's say, interrupt a little bit to go back to definitions about culture and language, because culture has been discussed widely for at least a few centuries, but new research and the local trend now in anthropology is to consider culture as a process, as the result of branchement, French word, French concept brought by Jean-Louis Amser in 2001. By branchement, Jean-Louis Amser means connections or a network without a pure beginning or end, a way of reflecting upon culture, which, contrary to the metaphor hybridity, does not suppose purity and closure. So it means that culture is adaptative, answering contextual needs, and pluralistic, even universal. It manifests itself and requires the presence of at least a third party. And as a reminder, we have to keep in mind the dangers of the quest of the origins, which lead to essentialism, exclusion, and extreme ideologies. In Europe, we are still traumatized by of course, the Nazi history. They were looking for the pure human race and would kill everyone else. So this is a kind of essentialism that is quite dangerous, and that open theories of cultures are trying to avoid nowadays. Another thing is that the category of culture is highly political and can carry strong values and interests. Can I have the next slide, please? I will go back to my core research, which is wayang golek, a traditional puppet theater present in West Java in Indonesia, to illustrate what I mean by the fact that culture is a political category. Wayang golek is wayang golek. It exists approximately since the 15th century and is kind of derivation of, we should say, branchement, born from wayang kulit, which is a traditional shadow puppet theater you find mainly in Central Java and Bali also. In the 19th century, with the Orientalist theories in Indonesia and the rise of nationalism at the beginning of the 20th century, new language categories entered in Indonesia, such as budaya, which means culture, seni, arts, tradisi, tradition, ritual, ritual. All these categories became political categories, means of domestication, as so-called by Jean-Pemberton, of the elite, which means that they have the effect to turn practices into objects or objectification, and also open the way to politicization and academic studies. I talk about the domestication of the elites because at the time of the colonization, Japanese elites were deprived from economical and military powers, and they actually invested in a new sphere of power. There was a cultural one that became the same, but making standardization powers for all the arts. So this is why it became a way of accepting their new status as colonized. From 1945, after the independence of the country, there were many efforts to control wayang golek by means of censor, propaganda, criminalization, and that was within the program the interests of the shaping of national identity and culture in the frame of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, unity in diversity. Ethnic identities were represented as juxtaposed with political or administrative circumscriptions, that means provinces. I give you an example. For example, West Java would be Sundanese, although there are not only Sundanese people in West Java. There are people from Cirebon who have distinct culture, and so on. All this within the configuration of the Indonesian Republic. Since the 2000s, democratization and decentralization is at stake, and we can observe a strong revival of local identities, some might say indigenous identities, and also the introduction of the heritage, warisan Indonesian concept, brought by the programs by the UNESCO. So, what I mean here is that by considering wayang golek or categorizing it as seni, budaya, tradisi, warisan, and ultimately as pagelaran, which means performance, actually all these categories are only covering part of the problem of the issue. Wayang golek is not only arts. Wayang golek is about communication. Wayang golek is about economic activities as well. Wayang golek is about shaping the community. It's not only culture, it's not only tradition. But in giving those names, it allows us to talk about an object that also can become a product. And this will open cultural and economic capitalization with the giving of value. For example, heritage as an economic value now, since you can export it, for example, or invite people to witness it. It also makes things more controllable and exploitable, and it also opens to further developments, including within the creative industry and creation. Next slide. What about language? Language, of course, is part of the culture. It's an expression medium. It is word shaping. We shape the world with our words, with the way we construct our language. It is also shaping and carrier of social and cultural identity. Sundanese people, for example, refer to themselves as Sundanese because they speak Sundanese, not only because of this, but this is a big part. Language is also carrying aesthetics. We think about literature, we think about poetry, we think about songs, so aesthetics. But it is also carrying political values, as every language is included inside power relationships. And we're talking here about hierarchy and the glossia relationship. Glossia relationship is when you have a language dominating another in the speech. For example, back to the Sundanese example, Sundanese is in a situation of diglossia compared to Indonesian language that is dominating in the field of media, in the field of education, and so on. Although Indonesia also has, but still it is carrying political relationship. Languages are exactly like culture, going through adaptation, so they don't remain in the same shape from the beginning to the end. They adapt every day. And scripts here come as embodiment, materialization, and development of the spoken language, and sometimes become a language themselves, especially thinking about digital languages. Next slide, please. So now what's the relationship between indigenous people and anthropology? Because this is the legitimation of me being here today. Indigenous, natives, aboriginals were the fantasy and the legitimation for emerging anthropology in the 19th century. It was done in a context of discrimination and essentialization. It was done in the context of domination, which means that basically you had the Western anthropologists who would go to the colonies or the colonies of other countries to study about white people over there, different people over there. So it was discriminating those people as radically different, sometimes even as non-human, like primitive people, and so on. And the distance in time and space were the guarantee for scientific objectivity. I insist I'm here talking about anthropology in the 19th century. Things have changed a lot, unfortunately. But we see a new rise of indigenous concepts right now in the 2000s as a consequence of globalization. Globalization has a two side effect. First, we have indeed the risk or the trend to homogenization of the global sphere. So everyone sees the same movies. Everyone sees Hollywood or Bollywood movies. Anyone can do making. Anyone can do things that are similar all around the world. However, this is also fostering a crystallization, or coming back to local identities, as they are thought to be a remedy for globalization, if globalization is not as a threat, or it is the way of people to position themselves within this world. In 2007, we have the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People after 20 years of negotiation, after an initial report outlining the oppression, marginalization, and exploitation suffered by indigenous people. So here is the definition of indigenous people as proposed by the United Nations in 1982. Indigenous communities, people, and nations are those that, having a historical continuity with pre-invasion and pre-colonial societies that develop on their territories, consider themselves distinct from other sectors of the society, no prevailing in those territories or part of them. They form at present non-dominant sectors of society and are determined to preserve, develop, and transmit to future generations their ancestral territories and their ethnic identities as the basis of their continued existence as peoples in accordance with their own cultural patterns, social institutions, and legal systems. And I shall add here and languages. So now the question is this kind of declaration only fixing history, or can it also become a tool for new discrimination and cleavage? That's the question. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about challenges. At present, we have a society building an intercultural communication that is going very fast. Next slide, please. And we have to consider the cyber-physical reality. It's not only for our everyday life, it's also a very drastic change, also for scientific disciplines such as anthropology. What is the cyber-physical reality or system? It is the close interaction and mutual influence between online and offline reality, thus creating complex reality in which actors move and act on a regular basis. Within these virtual networks, we have the possibility to be present in many contexts simultaneously at the same time, beyond physical presence, which is radically different from past technology, where we can only be in one context at the same time. This generalized access to the digital proposes an obvious globalization, and we can all access the same sources if we want, and we can all connect at the same time if we want to. And also concrete links within different levels of action and decision, and thus linking local and global action very concretely. Next slide, please. But still, it raises many questions. While the ideal may be the access for everyone, equal and free access and representation online, however, what can we see, what can we observe? We can see that the involvement in the physical reality implies the presence of interfaces, and the question is, who can really master them? So it raises the question of access and digital literacy, which is not the same, not equal for everyone. Second, we still observe many inequalities, like domination, diglossia on the web, for example. English is prevailing, and this is euphemism to say it. I mean, English is just the language in the net right now. I guess it's followed close by Chinese or other Mandarin, other languages for China. English is very, very dominating, and it is experimented every day. And the last question is, who are indigenous people in this cyber-physical reality? Who are the natives? Because we can have a different category. In the offline reality, we have people linked to territorial spaces and history, but what happens if we ask this question on this near cyber-physical reality? The question is open, of course. Next slide, please. So what's happening nowadays for local or indigenous cultures in the new reality? So my predecessor, Brian, had already gave a kind of an overlook and saying that local communities now trying to grab this opportunity to exist on the cyber-physical reality. Let's see a little bit deeper right now. First, being included in this reality means that you enter the competition in the global market, since actually you're not always a minority when you enter the cyber-physical reality, the cyber part of it. You have a value shift from presentation to representation. Let me give you an example. If you use the language with your friends, with an everyday interaction, so you talk with your friend, let's say in Indonesian, and then sometimes you're presenting yourself. You don't need to say, "Oh, I'm talking Indonesian." You just talk. Okay, this is what I call presentation. Then someone else comes. This person doesn't speak Indonesian, so you will need to know and understand that you speak Indonesian, and then you shift to representation. You are going to represent yourself as. So this is a shift that is happening for everyone coming out. It is also about adaptation and innovation, of course, because you don't behave exactly the same here face-to-face or online. The question is that cyber reality bringing the end of essentialization, or is it a new start for identity crystallization? Is it a way to open to the others, or to claim a closed identity? Because as we said earlier, it's about naturally, cultures and languages are open, they're always adapting, but people tend to consider them as fixed and take the time, the right moment to say, this is my culture now, and to present it as fixed, although it is not. Finally, cyber-physical reality is a new space for culture, and since the COVID-19 pandemic, it became actually almost the only space for culture. As, for example, going back to my core example, wayang golek cannot be performed. You have thousands of people coming to watch, you cannot perform them. So what do people do? They propose online performances. And here you have an example of Central Japanese Dalang People Moro presenting a virtual performance that is translated in 4 languages, English, Indonesian, Japanese, and French. And the other example here is from Dalang dan Semangat Senaria, using wayang golek, virtual wayang golek performance at the initiative of political parties. Everything online, and this is the only thing we can do now in this field. So again, in the thousand, we can observe a revival of local cultures, languages, and identities that is again strongly connected to the process of decentralization at stake in Indonesia since the beginning of the 2000s. Next slide, please. So now, back to the future. How do we call the future? How do we envision it? Sure, we have to think about sustainability, including cultural and environmental stewardship. Next slide. So what about digitalization? Bailam gave an overview about languages, and is much more specialist than I am in this field. But what for? First, digitalization can allow to exist, or at least bring the acknowledgement in the cyber-physical reality. Being only in the physical reality means that you don't exist in a big part of what is now cyber-physical reality, but it's our reality right now. Second, it is how we present and represent ourselves. It allows to introduce, for example, languages or cultures to people who don't know them. If I talk about Sudanese cultures, about Sudanese culture 5 years ago in France, no one knows about it. Now if I talk about it, people can have much more access to what it is, and they can watch it online. It is also about preservation. By digitalizing, for example, ancient scripts or performances, you preserve the archive. It's very important. The question is, with this digitalization, you need to standardize. For example, if you want to bring ancient scripts into digitalization, then you have to standardize them. So is it going to bring new fixation? It's a question. But also, it is also a fantastic adaptation medium. It is the extension of the cultural and belief within this space. And all these sources then become resources for the apprehension of new interaction, for adaptation and exchange, and also for innovation and creation in various domains, including information technologies. Because who knows, maybe the scripts can be used for different purposes. You can have new creations, and you can have new technological creations as well. Next slide, please. And so the final thoughts will be about the question about the benefits of the local communities. As it was presented by Hilham, you have indeed a rise of cultural and identity awareness that is happening here, not only in Indonesia, but also all over the world. So local communities are grasping, are taking the opportunity to exist and to be acknowledged inside of physical reality. But this has to remain the case, because if not these communities or these heritage holders who are moving, can it become a new tool for control and exploitation? I don't know, by governments, by companies, you never know. So what is important to keep in mind is values like freedom of expression, democracy, representation, community and self-image that is controlled by themselves. And of course, always sustainability. So everything about a community-based process. And I think I will stop here because my time is over. I would like to thank you all for this attention. I hope these questions might be useful for each one of us. Thank you very much.